So this Advent season, we're looking at the trip to Bethlehem. This is the journey that's taken each year at Christmas time. Christians, non-Christians, those with no faith tradition at all, we enter this traditional time of celebration. And we cannot help but stop and smile, at least internally, at the sight of a manger scene, especially if that scene is filled with children dressed up for their part. When Denny and I lived at Unity Village in Missouri, I was moved one year to attend a Christmas pageant at a very large traditional Christian church nearby, the First Baptist Church of Raytown, Missouri. I passed by it often, and the church had really a flashy, large outdoor LED sign that was programmable, and it was advertising this pageant. Now, this was a mega church, and I thought, what the heck? I'd like to see a sweet children's pageant. I mean, don't we all? This place was huge. There was a main stage and then two smaller stages, one on each side. It was so big that they had live sheep, real ones, and they were on one of the side stages. There were 20 or more people at a time being featured on these stages. There was a cast of hundreds. And behind all this, above was the choir loft. And it was 4 or 5 rows deep and covered the entire expanse of the back of the sanctuary. And below that was the orchestra. It was impressive. It was inspiring, to say the least. Now, my youngest daughter, Kate, who many of you have met, she and her husband, David, try to make it down at least once a year when I'm in town. She was in a play when she was in her teens called The Oft-Told Story. And it was written and produced by a member of our Unity Church in St. Petersburg, actually by Alan Armstrong and his mom. And the play was presented as a trip to Bethlehem, told through the viewpoint and the voices of all the animals. And the main characters were the 3 camels carrying the wise men. Now, these were sassy camels with an attitude, but all of the animals in the manger scene had a part. And the costumes were elaborate and professionally created. It was quite a production also, although on a smaller scale, but still impressive and inspiring. Inspiring also are the sweet nativity scenes that we see outside of churches and precious plays put on by Sunday school children. We make a choice. We make a choice each year. We can delight in the traditional nativity scene and the story that goes with it, or we can reject it and wonder why we're even talking about the story, since there's very little historical evidence that it occurred at all. Or we can do what we do best in Unity. We delight in the story and we embrace it in our own way. We look towards the story for the message for us today. It's what we choose to do with the symbols and all the symbolism of Christmas. We embrace them as our own, and we allow them to grow us, to deepen our faith. But this year during Advent, we are doing exactly that. And to aid us in this endeavor, Lori and I will be using a resource, a book called The Trip to Bethlehem. There we go. And this is by Hypatia Hasbrock. She was a Unity minister. She served as the dean of the Unity Ministerial Education Program, was the director of education for the Association of Unity Churches. That's what we now call Unity Worldwide Ministries. She led churches in Missouri and Kansas and California, her career spanning about 27 years. And she made her transition in 2001. She also authored the book Handbook for Positive Prayer. It's an excellent Unity resource. And so in the trip to Bethlehem, Hypatia begins by telling us that the Christmas story is our story. It's everyone's story. And all stories in the Bible have 3 levels of meaning. The first one is the literal meaning: who, what, where, when, perhaps how, and why. And then there's the moral meaning. This is the implied lesson, an example of if you do this, this is what's going to happen, and you should or should not do this, the right thing to do. It's a lesson in morality. And then the third is the metaphysical meeting. And this is where in unity, we try to live and move and have our beingness, understanding the message behind the message, viewing the story symbolically, interpreting the people and the places for what they're representing, and then applying that interpretation to our own lives. Our approach, our concern is not whether or not the story is historically accurate. Our approach is to understand first that the greatest value of any story in the Bible is what the story stands for, what the parts of the story symbolize. Hypatia states that our concern is the discovery of the divine ideas and the truth symbolized by parts of the Christmas story. And so as we begin this journey during the Advent season, we're going to look at the different parts and look at them, what they literally mean in Hebrew, as well as metaphysically. So Bethlehem literally means house of sustenance or house of living. So metaphysically, it's a consciousness of the divine presence, of omnipresent, of divine energy, which provides everything needed to create and sustain, everything, including the emerging Christ consciousness. And this is where these 4 weeks of Advent takes us, on a personal journey to Bethlehem, a transformative trip to spiritual Bethlehem, a Christ consciousness continually emerging in and as and through us. I'm going to paraphrase a little bit, but I'm going to share what Hypatia says about this journey. She says the element that holds any story together and governs the selection of other elements is the theme, the central idea that the story illustrates. The first indication of the theme is the actual framework of the Christmas story, that it's a journey. A journey is an important mythic symbol for the process of transformation. The trip of Bethlehem is a round trip during which Mary and Joseph undergo a profound change. They leave Nazareth as a couple. And because a child is born away, they return as a family. A newborn child is almost always the center of attention and the factor that transforms a couple into a family. The total journey in the Christmas story is archetypal, for it illustrates the inner rebirth process through which the higher self emerges. It's the center of consciousness, of Christ consciousness, and it becomes the integrating force within, and it transforms the individual. And so our journey to Bethlehem is a transformational process for each one of us, to the extent that we are willing to deepen our understanding, to let these symbols grow us and deepen our faith. Since Jerusalem figures in the Christmas story 3 times, we look at the very name, Jerusalem, which means in Hebrew, habitation of peace, a peaceful state of mind. That is required for a spiritual process to take place in our lives. It doesn't happen in chaos. It happens when we allow ourselves to enter that peaceful state of mind in this high state of consciousness. Now, Nazareth is where both Mary and Joseph lived, Nazareth of Galilee. It's a small, undistinguished little village, and in Hebrew, it has several meanings. It means branch or offshoot or sprout. So metaphysically, Nazareth could represent an innocence, a sprouting of Christ consciousness. That is in every one of us, regardless of whether we might be on a spiritual path. We approach life, not jaded, but childlike, innocent, open to spiritual understanding. Now, Nazareth is located in Galilee, and the name Galilee literally means rolling energy or momentum. So you combine this definition with the definition of Nazareth, and we have the nourishment, the nurturing, the impetus to grow in our understanding. We look at some of the symbols within the Christmas story, men and women, animals, numbers, and things. And we hold each from a metaphysical perspective. that enriches and personalizes the story for us, because I'll be sharing with you what some of these metaphysical definitions are, but they're personal also, what they mean to you. Doing this takes nothing away from the Christmas story. It only adds to, it enhances the story for us, each one of us individually. Now, the story focuses on Mary, and she represents the feminine principle that's considered to be passive and receptive. A woman represents the soul, the form that gives shape to the spiritual essence. And the soul is recognized as a spiritual part of ourselves. Women represent intuition and wisdom, love, relatedness, the ability to relate harmoniously with God, the people, and our human experience, the human environment. Women represent the nurturing ability, inner life, and the feeling nature. Spirit is represented by a male figure, perhaps because in many cultures, men are in the leadership roles and initiate new activities. Men also represent power, creativity, the intellect, and reason. Men are seen as the protectors governing our outer life of the individual. Men also represent the thinking nature. Now, most of the animals which appear in the Christmas story are not in the Bible. They've been added by theology and tradition over time. The story in the Gospel of Matthew mentions no animals. The Gospel of Luke implies sheep and mentions the offering of a pair of turtle doves. Now, a flock of sheep represents our 7 virtues, usually defined as honesty, prudence, temperance, courage, justice, charity, and compassion. Sheep literally provide wool. They're a warmth of substance. The turtle dove, which is a distinct variety of dove, is an ancient symbol for fidelity and human affection. Numbers mentioned in the Christmas story are also meaningful. The mystical meanings attached to them are ancient. 3, as in representing the 3 wise men and the 3 gifts, these symbolize spiritual synthesis. 3 is the Holy Trinity, Father, Son, Holy Spirit, and in unity, mind, idea, expression. 3 also stands for completeness and an inner spiritual process. The star, because stars are in the heavens, they symbolize ideas that come from God rather than from our human awareness, but from our inner divine wisdom. The star that guided the wise men has a special meaning. It symbolizes both the idea of the indwelling Christ and the power of the divine ideas that lead us to its realization. The east symbolizes the inner spiritual realm. The manger is a container for food for domestic animals, and it represents provision for the human being in which the Christ consciousness becomes manifest. And the gifts of the wise men, gold is the richness of spirit or spiritual wisdom. Incense is the presence of spirit. Frankincense is a symbol for holiness or purity. And myrrh symbolizes the eternity of spirit. And there are characters in the Christmas story. Angels always symbolize messages from God. The baby Jesus, fully human and fully divine, his birth represents a new idea. Now, the name Jesus in Hebrew means deliverance, savior, and helper. Mary represents purity and faith and all the attributes associated with women. Joseph, the name signifies that the process of evolution enhances consciousness and all the male attributes. The shepherds represent the forces within us that protect and guard, guardians. And the wise men, wisdom. All 3 of them represent the synthesis of wisdom. When we place ourselves within this story, within each character, each representation, it comes together to reveal the spiritual gifts in our lives and in our nature, our divine nature, our Christ consciousness. And we possess all of these attributes. We are supported in all the ways described for Mary and Joseph and the baby Jesus. A journey is a journey, even if we do not step outside our abode. It's a spiritual one. It's an inner journey. And we possess all 12 of the powers identified by Charles Fillmore, co-founder of the Unity Movement, all 12 and more, at varying degrees of expression, but we possess and have the ability to express each one in its fullness. Today, I will elaborate on two, and each week of Advent, as we move into this arrival of the Christ consciousness, we will be looking at different powers of these 12 powers. Today, we're looking at renunciation and wisdom. The power of renunciation is also called the power of elimination. So as we prepare for this trip to Bethlehem, we take a look at what we wish to pack and what we prefer not to take with us. What we are not taking with us on our spiritual journey is what we are releasing, what has no place in our lives, regardless of how long it may have been in our drawer, our closet, or in our hearts. Being both human and divine, our human self has much to leave out of that suitcase, much that will not serve us on our path to spiritual transformation. Our well-established ego, keeping us safe on our human earthly path, is not needed. It's not desired now, nor is jealousy or anger, overactive pride, rivalry, overdeveloped fear, error thoughts of separation, the inflated need to please others, to be accepted, to be recognized, to cling. We can let all of those things go, because we can't get far on our journey with these behaviors, these energies weighing us down. We can't even lift our bag. We allow our trust and our power of renunciation to release all that does not serve us. We have faith in our ability to recognize what we no longer need. We can release it again and again and again. And we turn to our divine nature of wisdom. We allow wisdom to guide us, remembering to turn within, to check our inner compass, relying on the divine to lead the way. Where we have faith in our inner wisdom, and we're ready to begin our journey. We're excited for what is to come. Advent is the arrival. We're excited for the gifts to be revealed, the expansive life that we're meant to live, each one of us. We've released what we no longer need, and we've turned within to seek God first, the source of our divine inspiration, always, the source of all of our divine attributes. The trip to Bethlehem is our journey, a journey of rediscovery, of reawakening, of growing, deepening our faith. It's a journey of spiritual transformation. And I'm happy to be a fellow traveler with you this Advent season and beyond. And so it is.